So this research publishes details of 23,000 older Australians aged over 65 who've been flown from the country to the city for access to healthcare. The top 3 reasons that the Flying Doctors has flown this group of people is for cardiac illness, for injuries and accidents, and for illnesses of the digestive system. If we think about injuries, we're flying older Australians from the country to the city for access to care after a fall. But once that person returns from hospital to home, there's insufficient access to physiotherapy or occupational therapy, which is so important to an older Australian recovering from their fall. So the research is telling us, if an older Australian requires treatment for falls, it also means access to occupational therapy and physiotherapists across country Australia. Well, the Flying Doctors research shows that stroke prevalence is 1.5 times higher for older Australians in country areas than it is in the city, yet only 8% of stroke rehabilitation services are based in rural and remote Australia. In order to ensure that older Australians are recovering from stroke, we have to distribute more access to stroke rehabilitation services right across country Australia. We know that older Australians in country areas are more likely to be suffering cancer than people in the city. Access to care is mostly metropolitan based, so that after treatment, when an older person returns to their rural or remote home, there aren't the same access to oncology, to haematology or palliative care services. So if we're going to properly provide for the cancer needs, the cancer treatment of older Australians, it means placing more cancer services and palliative care in remote and country Australia. Well, it's a good thing that country Australia is ageing, but with that success comes a forecast increase in neurological conditions such as Alzheimer's and dementia. In fact, Alzheimer's and dementia is forecast to increase 50% in country Australia over the coming decade. For the Flying Doctors, that asks us, should we in fact become the Royal Flying Aged Care Service? Not to be building bricks and mortar, but rather to be ensuring there's sufficient access to the staff, the workforce in country Australia to provide for older people as they age in country.
This research is very important because Australia's population is ageing. It's ageing in rural remote areas as well as in the cities. The numbers grow quite dramatically over the next couple of decades, and we need to understand what the needs are, how they're being met or not being met now, and plan for those into the future. And plan so that we're using our resources more effectively, both in terms of the use of taxpayers' dollars, but also in terms of the quality of life that we're affording to people when they have health challenges. I think people underestimate the degree to which older Australians are throughout rural and remote areas and the important role that they're playing in those areas, in their communities and their families. So it's very important that we understand them, because rural and remote Australia is always more vulnerable in terms of services. It doesn't ever have the same number of services. So getting our heads around what it is that they're experiencing and what are the alternative things that we can do to address those needs is going to be really important as numbers grow. Well, I think the RFTS survey shows us that there are many things that people are being brought from remote areas into provincial and city hospitals for at significant expense and significant disruption to them that we could better address locally. Now that's easier said than done, but it tells us a story about those people and their situation. COTA has strongly advocated a comprehensive approach to an ageing population, but within a comprehensive approach we have to tackle the situation of all the different segments. Older people are as diverse, or indeed more diverse, than the population as a whole. So rural and remote older Australians, Indigenous older Australians from different cultural backgrounds are all important components of the mosaic that make up an older Australia, as are men and women and people at different parts of that life stage. So understanding rural and remote older Australia is just as important as understanding city Australia, provincial Australia, men, women, and all sorts of different backgrounds. I think that this research does this point to needs that have to be addressed in a multifaceted way, and that as we plan the rest of the needs, we have to say, how can we deal with the needs that this research tells us about? How can we complement what is already being done, the excellent work being done by RFDS, to look at taking some of the pressure off locally about improving people's access to services and quality of life, who have just the same kind of rights and needs as the rest of Australia.